The private gym in Los Angeles wasn't meant for headlines. It was the kind of place where serious people trained without noise. No flashing cameras, no dramatic entrances, no staged publicity. Just discipline, sweat, and quiet focus. That evening, the air carried a different kind of electricity. Inside the ring, Manny Pacquiao was finishing a rapid pad session. His gloves cracked against the mitts with surgical precision, jab, cross, pivot, slip. Every movement was sharp. Every breath controlled. Even at half speed, he looked untouchable. A small circle of trainers and industry professionals watched with admiration. Hollywood producers had seen action sequences, choreographed fights, cinematic knockouts. But this was different. This was real timing. Real rhythm. Near the edge of the gym floor stood Jason Statham. Arms folded. Expression calm. Eyes locked on Pacquiao's footwork. He wasn't impressed in the way casual observers were impressed. He was analyzing. Studying angles. Watching how Pacquiao shifted weight between feet. Measuring distance with quiet calculation. Someone nearby joked, half laughing. That's 8-division world champion speed. Even movie heroes can't script that. Jason didn't smile. Instead he stepped forward. The sound of his shoes against the mat floor drew a few glances. Pacquiao finished his combination and lowered his gloves slightly, sensing movement. Their eyes met. No hostility. No ego. Just two professionals recognizing skill. Jason spoke evenly. You ever test timing against someone outside your sport? A few nervous chuckles echoed around the gym. Pacquiao tilted his head slightly, curious. You offering? Light, Jason replied. Controlled. Silence spread faster than noise ever could. No one expected this. Not tonight. Not here. Hollywood had seen Jason throw punches on screen for decades. Explosions. High-speed chases. Perfect choreography. But standing across from one of boxing's greatest legends? That wasn't scripted. Pacquiao smiled, not mockingly but respectfully. Okay, he said. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. This wasn't about proving who was tougher. It wasn't about headlines or humiliation. It was about something far more dangerous. Curiosity between two disciplined men. And in that quiet Los Angeles gym, under simple fluorescent lights, a challenge had just been made that would soon leave Hollywood stunned. The gym staff moved quickly but without panic. Wordlessly, gloves were brought out. Hand wraps tightened. The small group of onlookers instinctively stepped back to give space around the ring. This wasn't a publicity stunt. There were no production crews, no scripted camera angles. Just professionals witnessing something rare. Manny Pacquiao removed his training mitts and rolled his shoulders loose. Even in a relaxed state, his presence carried the quiet authority of someone who had stepped into the ring against the best in the world, and beaten them. Across from him, Jason Statham wrapped his hands carefully, methodically. His movements were efficient, almost meditative. He wasn't trying to look impressive. He wasn't trying to look fearless. He was preparing. A producer standing near the ropes whispered, "Is this actually happening?" A trainer replied under his breath, "If it does, it'll be light." Manny's too professional to let it turn into anything else. That was the unspoken agreement, control above ego. Pacquiao stepped into the ring first, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. The canvas barely made a sound beneath him. His rhythm was natural like breathing. Jason followed, ducking under the ropes with steady composure. He didn't bounce. He didn't posture. He simply walked to the center and nodded once. They touched gloves. The gesture carried more weight than words. This wasn't about Hollywood bravado. It wasn't about proving that movie choreography translates into championship skill. It was about curiosity. What happens when cinematic precision meets elite athletic mastery? Pacquiao smiled lightly. We keep it technical, he said. Jason gave a small nod. Distance and timing. Around the ring, conversation stopped completely. Even the sound of the air conditioning seemed louder now. The trainer stepped forward to act as referee. Light contact. Controlled pace. Break clean. Both men acknowledged. The bell wasn't official, just a soft tap on the ring post. But it was enough. They began to circle. Immediately, the difference in rhythm was visible. Pacquiao's footwork was fluid and elastic, shifting angles almost invisibly. Jason's stance was more grounded, deliberate. Less bounce, more structure. Pacquiao tested first, a faint shoulder twitch, then a quick jab that stopped inches short. Fast. Sure. A warning without impact. Jason didn't bite on the feint. His guard adjusted slightly. Eyes locked on Pacquiao's centerline rather than his gloves. Another whisper came from ringside. He's not panicking. That was the first surprise. Most people freeze when facing elite speed. Jason didn't. Pacquiao increased tempo just slightly. Light foot pivot, quick double jab, half-step exit. All controlled. All precise. Jason absorbed the rhythm. He didn't chase. He didn't lunge. Instead, he shifted subtly, cutting the ring rather than following the movement. The gym's energy shifted again. This wasn't a celebrity stepping into danger blindly. This was someone who had trained. Not at championship level. Not at world title intensity. But trained enough to understand space, angles, and restraint. Pacquiao's expression changed from playful curiosity to analytical focus. He had expected enthusiasm. He found discipline. The pace remained light, but the mental chess match intensified. Every movement now carried intent. Every adjustment was being studied. Hollywood had seen scripted rivalries. But this was unscripted respect building in real time. And as the round continued, one thing became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't going to be a joke. It was going to be a lesson. The movement inside the ring grew sharper. The playful curiosity from the opening seconds had faded. What remained was focus. Manny Pacquiao began to test real angles now, still controlled, still professional, but faster. His feet glided across the canvas, shifting left unexpectedly, then cutting right before resetting. His jab snapped forward with sudden precision, stopping just short of impact. Jason saw it, but barely. The speed difference was undeniable. A quick triple combination flashed toward him, jab, cross, light hook, all pulled at the last inch. The sound of gloves slicing air was enough to make several observers inhale sharply. Yet Jason Statham didn't retreat in panic. He adjusted. Instead of reacting to the hands, he focused on Pacquiao's shoulders and hips, the true indicators of motion. His guard tightened slightly. His stance lowered half an inch. Subtle changes, but intentional. Pacquiao noticed. He increased tempo again, not recklessly but experimentally. A feint to the body. Step outside. Quick jab upstairs. This time the glove touched lightly against Jason's guard. Cling. Controlled. A small murmur rippled around the gym. Jason exhaled slowly. No frustration. No ego. He stepped laterally instead of backward. That was the first shift. Rather than chasing Pacquiao's speed, he began cutting off angles, using positioning instead of reaction time. It wasn't flashy, but it was intelligent. Pacquiao circled left. Jason mirrored, but not directly. He stepped diagonally, narrowing the space. A veteran trick. Reduce the canvas. Force engagement. Pacquiao's grin returned, smaller now, more focused. He launched a quick two-piece combination, light but sharp. Jason blocked the first, slipped just outside the second. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Then Jason responded. Not with speed. With timing. A measured jab to the body, light contact, respectful, followed by a controlled right hand that stopped short at Pacquiao's shoulder line. The gym went silent. It wasn't power. It wasn't dominance. It was placement. Pacquiao stepped back half a pace. Not hurt, just acknowledging. Now the rhythm changed again. The next exchange was faster. Pacquiao darted in with a signature angle shift, appearing on Jason's flank in a blink. A quick tap to the guard, then pivot out. Jason turned with him, slightly late but composed. Another flurry came, this time a 5-punch sequence, still pulled, still light but blindingly quick. Jason absorbed most of it on his gloves. But instead of freezing after the burst, he stepped forward immediately, reclaiming center position. That surprised everyone. Most non-professionals back up after speed like that. Jason advanced. Not aggressively. Deliberately. The distance closed. For a brief moment they were chest-to-chest range, the kind of range where reflex meets instinct. Pacquiao tested with a short inside tap. Jason responded with controlled framing, creating space without shoving. No escalation. Just awareness. The onlookers exchanged stunned looks. This wasn't cinematic choreography. This was two disciplined men solving a physical equation in real time. Pacquiao stepped back, bouncing lightly again. His eyes narrowed, evaluating. Jason rolled his shoulders once, breathing steady. Neither man was trying to win. But neither was willing to be careless. The tempo rose one more notch. Pacquiao launched a lightning-fast entry, jab, pivot, hook, fluid as water. Jason anticipated the pivot this time. He shifted early. And for the first time in the round, Pacquiao's exit angle was partially cut off. Nothing dramatic happened. No heavy blow landed. But the moment lingered. Pacquiao nodded slightly. He had been read. The bell tapped softly again, signaling the end of the round. Silence held for half a second longer than usual. Then the room exhaled. No knockdowns. No humiliation. But something undeniable had occurred. This wasn't an actor stepping into fantasy. And it wasn't a champion overwhelming a novice. It was discipline meeting discipline. And Hollywood, even in that quiet gym, had just witnessed something far more impressive than a knockout. The soft tap signaling the end of the round echoed louder than it should have. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Manny Pacquiao stepped back, lowering his gloves slowly, chest rising in steady rhythm. Across from him, Jason Statham exhaled once through his nose and relaxed his shoulders. No one in the gym clapped. They were too stunned for that. The silence wasn't awkward, it was evaluative. The kind of silence that follows something unexpectedly impressive. A trainer leaned toward another and whispered, "That wasn't survival." He was adjusting. Pacquiao walked toward his corner, a small grin breaking across his face. Not amused. Not mocking. Impressed. Jason stepped back to his side of the ring, rolling his neck once, calm as ever. There was no triumphant expression. No look of relief. Just composure. The producers at ringside exchanged looks. One of them muttered quietly, "That didn't look like choreography." Another responded, "It wasn't." Pacquiao removed his mouthguard briefly and let out a short laugh. "You cut that angle," he said, nodding toward Jason. Jason gave a subtle shrug. "You telegraphed it the second time." That answer shifted the energy again. This wasn't celebrity enthusiasm. This was technical conversation. Pacquiao stepped closer, resting his gloves on the top rope. "Most people freeze after the third combination." Jason replied evenly, "Most people chase the hands instead of the hips." There was no ego in the exchange, only analysis. Around them, the gym had transformed from spectatorship into something closer to reverence. Trainers who had seen countless sparring sessions were watching with arms folded, thoughtful expressions on their faces. One assistant quietly said, "He didn't try to outspeed him. He slowed it down." That was the real surprise. Jason hadn't tried to fight like a world champion boxer. He had fought like himself. Grounded. Measured. Strategic. Pacquiao stepped back to center ring. "One more?" he asked casually. The question wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. Jason nodded once. Controlled. Again gloves touched. The second round began lighter, but sharper mentally. Pacquiao tested rhythm changes, slow, fast. Jason responded by disrupting timing with subtle foot placement, refusing to let the exchanges become chaotic. The room watched differently now. They weren't expecting a knockout. They were studying the chess match. Pacquiao darted in with a quick jab cross. Jason parried the jab and stepped slightly off-center, forcing Pacquiao to reset earlier than usual. A murmur. Then Pacquiao smiled wider. He increased fluidity, rapid bounce, shoulder feint, inside tap. Jason slipped the feint and held ground. That held ground moment, that was what stunned people. He wasn't reckless. But he wasn't intimidated. Midway through the round, Pacquiao unleashed his fastest burst of the night. A flash combination designed purely to test reaction speed. Jason absorbed the first two on his guard, rolled under the third lightly, and stepped out of range before the fourth could land. Clean exit. No panic. The gym reacted audibly this time. Pacquiao stopped and nodded. Good. Just one word. But it carried weight. As the seconds wound down, both men slowed naturally. Not out of exhaustion, out of understanding. They had already learned what they needed to learn. The final bell tap sounded. This time there was applause, restrained, respectful, genuine. Pacquiao walked forward first and extended his glove. Jason met it. Then Pacquiao did something unexpected. He lightly raised Jason's glove toward the small crowd. Not declaring victory. Not declaring equality. Declaring respect. That's discipline, Pacquiao said clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Jason shook his head slightly. That's experience, he replied, nodding toward Pacquiao. The exchange was simple, but it carried more impact than any dramatic ending could have. Around the ring, conversations began to buzz. Did you see that angle read? He wasn't overwhelmed. That composure. But what truly stunned Hollywood wasn't the technical exchanges. It was the absence of ego. There had been no trash talk. No dramatic gestures. No attempt to prove superiority. Just two professionals testing limits responsibly. As gloves were removed and hand wraps loosened, Pacquiao placed a hand briefly on Jason's shoulder. You respect the craft, he said quietly. Jason responded, you mastered it. In that moment, the narrative shifted completely. This wasn't actor challenges champion. It was discipline recognizes discipline. The producers watching weren't thinking about fight scenes anymore. They were thinking about authenticity. About what real composure looks like under pressure. The gym lights hummed softly as the tension dissolved into admiration. Outside those walls, Hollywood thrived on spectacle. Inside that ring, something far rarer had occurred. Professionalism. And that, more than any knockout, was what truly stunned everyone who witnessed it. The energy in the gym didn't fade after the second round, it deepened. Gloves were off now. The physical exchange had ended. But the real impact of what had just happened was only beginning to settle in. Manny Pacquiao sat on the edge of the ring, elbows resting on his knees, breathing steady. He wasn't fatigued. He was reflective. Across from him, Jason Statham removed his hand wraps slowly, methodical as always. For a few moments, no one interrupted them. Finally, one of the veteran trainers spoke. "You didn't try to win," he said to Jason. Jason looked up calmly. "That wasn't the objective." Pacquiao nodded slightly. "Most people come in here trying to prove something." Jason leaned back against the ropes. "If you walk into a master's arena trying to prove yourself, you've already misunderstood the lesson." That sentence shifted everything. This wasn't about whether Jason could keep up. It wasn't about whether Manny could dominate. It was about mindset. Pacquiao stood and walked back toward center ring, motioning Jason to join him, not to spar again but to demonstrate something. The small crowd instinctively quieted. "People think speed is everything," Pacquiao said, bouncing lightly once. "But speed without timing is waste." He threw a slow-motion combination, exaggerating each movement. Jason stepped in and adjusted his angle precisely where Pacquiao had earlier created space. Pacquiao smiled. "That," he said, pointing lightly, "is awareness." The gym watched as the two men began discussing foot placement, distance control, reaction windows, the kind of detailed breakdown usually reserved for elite fighters and coaches. Hollywood producers who had come expecting spectacle were now witnessing something far more valuable. Authenticity. One executive whispered, "This is better than any scripted rivalry." Because it wasn't rivalry. It was refinement. Pacquiao demonstrated one of his signature pivots again, slower this time, explaining how he shifts weight before exploding into angles. Jason nodded, studying the mechanics rather than the highlight. Then Jason responded by explaining how he trains for fight scenes, not to look powerful but to maintain believable control under camera pressure. "On film," Jason said, "you exaggerate motion. In here you minimize it." Pacquiao laughed softly. "Yes. Real fighting is small." The turning point wasn't physical. It was philosophical. The narrative had quietly changed from challenge to exchange. They weren't testing dominance anymore. They were sharing craft. A young assistant near ringside finally asked, "So, who won?" Both men looked at him. Pacquiao answered first. "If someone wins in light sparring, someone trained wrong." Jason added calmly, "The only loss would have been ego." The room absorbed that. This wasn't about headlines. It was about humility at the highest level. Pacquiao removed his gloves fully and extended his hand again, this time without cameras, without performance. "You move like someone who respects consequences," he said to Jason. Jason shook his hand firmly. "And you move like someone who earned every inch." That mutual acknowledgement became the defining moment of the night. Not a punch. Not a combination. Not even the angle cut that had surprised everyone. But the recognition between two disciplined professionals that mastery looks different in different arenas, and still deserves respect. Around them, conversation shifted tone. Instead of debating who was faster or stronger, people were talking about composure. About how rare it is to see high-profile figures engage without arrogance. One producer quietly said, "That's what audiences don't see enough, restraint." Pacquiao stepped down from the ring and gathered his things. Before leaving, he turned once more toward Jason. "Keep training," he said. "Not for film. For yourself." Jason nodded. "Always." As the gym slowly returned to its normal rhythm, the atmosphere felt lighter, but richer. What stunned Hollywood wasn't that an actor stepped into a ring with a legend. It was that neither man tried to outshine the other. There was no humiliation. No exaggeration. No viral knockdown. Just two craftsmen refining their craft. And in an industry fueled by drama, that quiet professionalism was far more powerful than spectacle. The turning point wasn't about punches thrown. It was about egos left outside the ring. And everyone who witnessed it understood something rare had just happened. Not a fight. A lesson. By morning the footage was everywhere. Clips from the gym, short, carefully trimmed segments, circulated across social media. Not dramatic knockdowns. Not slow-motion impacts. Just exchanges. Footwork. Angles. Respectful nods. Entertainment blogs tried to frame it as a celebrity showdown, but anyone who watched closely saw something different. They saw discipline. Manny Pacquiao returned to his normal training schedule the very next day. Roadwork before sunrise. Mitt drills. Conditioning circuits. For him, the session hadn't been an event, it had been routine. But interviews started rolling in. Did he surprise you? Pacquiao smiled in one clip. Surprise comes from underestimating people. I don't do that. Meanwhile, Jason Statham flew back to Los Angeles and went straight to a stunt rehearsal. No press conference. No boastful captions. No dramatic retelling. When a reporter asked if he had gone toe-to-toe with a legend, Jason answered simply, "I went to learn." That quote traveled faster than any highlight. Because in an era built on viral dominance, humility stood out. Inside Hollywood circles, the conversation shifted from spectacle to substance. Directors who had worked with Jason weren't surprised. They knew his background in diving, martial arts, and practical stunt work wasn't just for show. But seeing him step into a professional boxing environment, and adjust without ego, reinforced something important. He respected the craft beyond the camera. On sports talk shows, former fighters commented on the footage. One retired champion said, "You can tell within 10 seconds whether someone understands distance." He wasn't flailing. He was thinking. That mattered. Not because it elevated Jason to a fighter's status, but because it highlighted a rare trait, self-control under pressure. At the gym where it all happened, trainers replayed the session for younger athletes. "Watch this," one coach said, pausing on a moment where Jason reset instead of overcommitting. That's discipline. He could have tried to swing big for the cameras. He didn't. The lesson wasn't about who hit harder. It was about who stayed composed. Pacquiao, when asked later what he appreciated most about the session, answered thoughtfully. He didn't chase moments. He waited for them. In boxing, and in life, that difference defines longevity. Back in Los Angeles, Jason incorporated subtle adjustments into his training. His fight choreography became tighter. Less exaggerated. More economical. One stunt coordinator noticed immediately. "You changed your rhythm," he said. Jason nodded. Real fighters don't waste movement. The session hadn't been about proving he belonged in a ring. It had been about understanding why he didn't. That distinction gave him clarity. And clarity translates on screen. Industry insiders began discussing a new type of action realism. Performances rooted in restraint rather than chaos. Producers who had initially hoped for viral drama realized something more powerful had emerged. Credibility. Pacquiao's team, too, reflected on the moment. They appreciated that the actor had come with respect, not marketing agendas. "There's a difference between visiting and invading," one trainer said. He visited. That subtle choice, entering someone else's arena with humility, had defined the entire narrative. The public reaction continued evolving. At first, comment sections debated who looked sharper. Within days the tone changed. People were sharing clips with captions like, "Real recognizes real." Ego stayed outside the ropes. That's how professionals move. Even young athletes began referencing it in training sessions. A high school boxing coach reportedly told his students, "You don't measure yourself by dominating someone outside your level. You measure yourself by respecting it." The impact wasn't explosive. It was steady, quiet, and lasting. In interviews weeks later, both men were asked if they would spar again. Pacquiao smiled. "Training never stops." Jason answered similarly. "Learning never stops." There was no hype for a rematch. No manufactured tension. Because there had never been a rivalry to begin with. Only exchange. Only growth. The aftermath proved something subtle but powerful. Strength doesn't need spectacle. Skill doesn't need shouting. Respect doesn't need headlines. What stunned Hollywood wasn't that a world-class boxer and an action star shared a ring. It was that neither man tried to rewrite reality. They stayed in their lanes. They honored each other's craft. They left better than they arrived. And in an industry fueled by noise, that quiet professionalism echoed louder than any punch ever could. Months passed. The headlines faded. The clips stopped trending. The algorithms moved on. But inside certain gyms, on certain film sets, and in quiet conversations between professionals, that day still came up. Not as a spectacle. As a standard. Manny Pacquiao continued doing what he had always done. Disciplined training, structured preparation, steady refinement. For him, nothing had changed. And yet, something had. Young fighters occasionally approached him after sessions. "Sir, how do you stay calm when someone tries to test you?" He would answer simply, "If you know who you are, you don't feel tested." That mindset, quiet certainty, was the real takeaway from that afternoon. Across the ocean, Jason Statham felt a similar shift. On his next action film, the fight scenes carried a different tone. Less exaggerated fury. More measured control. Directors noticed that he conserved motion, tightened reactions, allowed silence between movements. It wasn't about copying boxing. It was about understanding discipline. During one behind-the-scenes interview, Jason was asked what he learned stepping into a professional fighter's environment. He paused before answering. "I learned that real mastery is economical," he said. "There's no wasted energy, physically or emotionally." That statement resonated far beyond cinema. Because the truth is, most people waste energy trying to appear strong. The moment in the gym had proven the opposite. Strength often looks quiet. In leadership seminars, clips from the sparring session were occasionally referenced, not for technique but for behavior. Corporate trainers pointed out how neither man tried to dominate the narrative. There was no mocking, no posturing, no humiliation, just presence. And presence is rare. One producer who had originally hoped for dramatic confrontation later admitted something surprising. "I went there expecting tension," he said. "I left thinking about professionalism." That shift mattered. In a culture obsessed with viral conflict, two accomplished individuals demonstrated that respect can still command attention. Pacquiao once summarized it best during a small charity event when someone jokingly asked if he had shown the actor who's boss. He smiled gently. "There was no boss," he said. "There was only learning." Jason, asked a similar question months later, echoed that sentiment. "Competition is useful," he said. "But comparison is noise." That distinction became the story's true conclusion. The world often frames encounters as battles. Someone must win, someone must lose. But that afternoon had quietly rejected that script. No winner. No loser. Only refinement. Young athletes who saw the footage didn't remember exact combinations. They remembered the handshake afterward. Film students studying realism didn't debate who landed cleaner shots. They noticed the restraint. And professionals in every field absorbed the same subtle lesson. You don't rise by diminishing others. You rise by sharpening yourself. The gym where it happened eventually removed the framed photo from the lobby, not because it wasn't important, but because it didn't need display anymore. The people who were there carried the lesson with them. Humility doesn't weaken authority. Control doesn't reduce power. Respect doesn't erase competitiveness. It refines it. In the end, what stunned Hollywood wasn't a punch or a pivot. It was composure. Two men at the top of different worlds stepped into the same space, not to conquer but to understand. And in doing so, they left behind something far more powerful than a viral moment. They left an example. And examples, unlike headlines, don't expire.